You are. We'll wait. Hi, my name is Milani Douglas. Welcome to another episode of the Curative Collective. This Curative Collective series is a part of our project Reclamation, Remedies, Recipes, and Rituals that's happening in partnership with 1015 Multimedia and the Family Arts Museum. The Curative Collective allows us to have conversations with people in our community that are working at the intersection of art, social change, and food justice. And I am always excited about this conversation, but I have definitely been waiting for this one. I am so excited to introduce you all to Elliot Gaskins of No Kid Hungry. I would be glad for him to tell us his story about how he even got into this project with Share Our Strength and No Kid Hungry. So, Elliot, please, by all means, first of all, tell us about what you do, and then I've got to hear your journey about how you got into what you do.
So, first, Milani, thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you, and Curative Collective, for this series and these important conversations. I want to also thank the National Museum of Women in Arts for the work that you do all the time, championing and recognizing women in the arts. And this month, especially Women's History Month, I'm honored to be with you. Women are the centerpiece of the American family, and that has been more apparent as we've dealt with this horrific pandemic. Without the strength of women in this country, we would be in a far different place. So thank you. I'm so glad to be with you today. Um, so I can tell you sort of a little bit of my journey, and then we can get sort of into sort of Share Our Strength and No Kid Hungry. But my background and career are framed by sort of three things: family, service, and gratitude. Um, you work on a project, you have a great experience. Those are all incredible. But what is sustaining to me, and I've always felt is sustaining, is family. So family has always been incredibly important to me, as well as service. I grew up in a community where there was a lack of resources and opportunity for many things, but I had an incredible grandmother, an incredible mother, who taught me that no matter how difficult you have it, there are always ways that you can help and give back to your community. So my grandmother was a domestic worker. She was cleaning the houses of mostly white people, but she did her work with dignity. She did her work with pride, and that was instilled at me from the very beginning. And finally, just my sense of gratitude. I'm so grateful for my grandmother and mother, but all of my ancestors and those that came before me. I'm in a position I am today trying to do the work to serve kids because of all those that came before me. So I have a deep sense of gratitude, and it came to my mind even more so over the last couple of weeks because my former coach passed away, and we just had his service this weekend. I was a track and field athlete, and he literally changed my life by giving me an opportunity to have an education at a Division I institution. He didn't heavily recruit me, but sight unseen, he saw me at one competition and on the spot gave me a scholarship. That moment absolutely changed my life. And so now I have three kids, and my kids' lives are 1000% different because he gave me that opportunity. And so I have a well of extraordinary gratitude for the work. And it is in that spirit that I have devoted my life to the nonprofit community for over 2 decades, which now brings me to Share Strength and working on a No Kid Hungry campaign. So I'll get into sort of Share Strength and tell you sort of about our work. But for those that don't know, Share Strength is an organization that's been around for 35 years. It was founded by our brother and sister tandem, Billy and Debbie Shore. They founded it really on a credit card in their basement, but they were so moved and inspired by the famine in Africa that they wanted to create an organization to address poverty and hunger, childhood hunger in this country. And so it was in that spirit that they founded Share Our Strength, with the idea that no matter where you're from, no matter who you are, there's always things and an opportunity that you have to give back and to share your strength in a compelling way. So it was in that spirit that Share Our Strength was created. And over the past 35 years, we've been devoted again to addressing poverty and ending childhood hunger. Over the last 10 years, we have been laser focused on our No Kid Hungry campaign, our all-out effort to end childhood hunger in America. If a kid doesn't have the food that they need, they can't learn, they can't be eager to learn in school, and they can't be socially engaged and connected in ways that are important for kids to do so, particularly at a young age. And so the No Kid Hungry campaign has been very focused on ensuring kids have access to breakfast, summer, and after school meals. We have been especially focused on breakfast because if kids don't start the day well, then that's not going to bode well for them in their school. And so we've been laser focused on breakfast, ensuring that millions more kids across the country have access to breakfast. To give you a sense, there are 22 million kids in this country who receive free and reduced price lunch, but not all of them receive breakfast. Upwards of 3 million of those kids are not receiving breakfast in school. And so the No Kid Hungry campaign was about elevating that effort, as well as elevating the work around summer and after school.
Elliot, that's so fascinating. And some of the numbers that you brought up, and I just would like to repeat them again. 22 million of our children receive free and reduced lunch. 3 million are not receiving breakfast. That is a large amount of children. And then also just the efforts for for you all to be able to share your strength to focus on this No Kid Hungry campaign. I wanted to know how does that work in DC, and can you talk about it on a local level and then also on a national level?
So our work sort of has slightly shifted a little bit because of the pandemic, but the way that our work sort of shows up is in all the communities that we work with prior to the pandemic, we wanted to support innovative ways that kids can access breakfast, in particular in school. Now, why is it that deficit between the kids that are not experiencing breakfast? Well, one of it is stigma. When you show up early for breakfast, everyone sees it. There's transportation issues. Sometimes breakfast is served way before the first period. And so it's extremely challenging for kids. And so our work in every community in the DMV and beyond is ensuring that we break all of those barriers. And so one of our signature programs and efforts is called Breakfast After the Bell, which is an effort where kids can receive breakfast in first period, where it's in the class and it's incorporated in the school day. And so not only is that more inclusive, but it also reduces the stigma because breakfast is available to everybody in that classroom. And so our work is focused on ensuring that kids have meals. Our work is focused, which we'll talk about a little bit more, on advocacy efforts in the federal and local level. And our work is also around driving awareness. If you're not surrounded by hunger on a daily basis, you may not know the profound extent of this crisis. Before the pandemic, hunger, and I want to step back and say, hunger has always been an issue. People are seeing the issue of hunger more and more because it's at a crisis level. But kids were always hungry. But prior to the pandemic, 1 in 7 children were facing hunger. 1 in 7. In a nation as prosperous as the United States of America, the fact that 1 in 7 kids were facing hunger is a moral disgrace. Yeah. And so, since the pandemic, we have reached extraordinary crisis levels and have lost a lot of the progress. So today, 1 in 4 kids could face hunger. And so our work has been elevated around supporting community needs in the moment to make sure that they have the resources to feed kids now outside of the school system. And we can talk about that in a little bit, but that is sort of how our work shows up in the present moment.
And this is why I think it's so important for art institutions and other cultural institutions to have these conversations with nonprofits, is because, we are dealing with some of the same issues in different ways, and definitely at different extremes. But we're really talking about making something that should be accessible to all, which is food, which is culture, which is enrichment. Like they say, you never just live off of bread alone, that you should also like have these things together. These are conversations we have to do this together in community. And so having this be accessible to people and for people to know, because if you are not aware of the issue, like I had no idea how that number changed from 1 in 7 to 1 in 4 during the pandemic. Can you talk about how your organization has shifted and pivoted to serve during the pandemic, your audience and your constituents?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I'm sure the National Museum of the Women in Arts and so many organizations has had to pivot and shift sort of how they orient around their work. And so prior to the pandemic, as I alluded to, our work was around working in, a lot of it was around working in the school system.
Right.
But of course, schools are closed. And so one of the things we did was elevate our work around emergency grants, which is immediate support that we're providing to communities. And so just to give you a sense, since March 2020, No Kid Hungry has granted more than $70 million to 1,822 organizations, which has served nearly 1 billion meals in that time. So, so these grants have funded everything from equipment like refrigerators and meal trucks to PPE, pallets of food, and more. As all of the heroic school nutrition staff scramble to feed kids outside of the cafeteria, our training and toolkits have provided best practices on how to do it safely and effectively. The other piece that I should mention is we have also elevated our commitment to our diversity in grants to reach communities that have been hardest hit by COVID. We know that communities of color have been disproportionately impacted, not only from the level of deaths by COVID, but on so many unemployment and on so many different issues. So we have elevated our focus even more in this area. So out of all of those grants that I just mentioned, 69% of those grants from this fall went to organizations working primarily in communities of color. And a third of those went to rural areas as well. And so that was the direct support that we provided, that we will continue to provide to meet the urgent need. But as I mentioned, advocacy is also hugely important. The grants and the support that we get, much of it is short term, but we need long lasting, sustained policies to ensure that kids are supported long term. As we know, long lasting progress in this country happens through legislation. So we've worked with officials from both parties at all levels to launch programs like Pandemic EBT, which is additional money that families have gotten for the missed meals that they haven't received in school. We've worked to expand SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, which is probably the best way to ensure kids can get the food they need. And we've secured waivers to provide flexibility and resources so schools have that flexibility to serve those meals outside of schools. So those are some core elements, and I'll pause here, but I would say one of the other things that we've worked hard to do is advance our Meals Finder map, which is an interactive map where you can put your address and you can find out what locations in my community are serving food in my community. We also have a texting line, 877-877, where you can text food and your zip code, and you'll get a list of meal sites, food banks in your community. And so throughout this pandemic, we have certainly lost a lot of progress. But one of the things that we know, and our founder talks about all the time, is that childhood hunger is solvable. Right. If we make smart policies and ensure that we can get the public will to get things done.
So I love that ending with the fact that this is something that is a solvable issue. We have an audience that is highly engaged, our Women Art and Social Change audience. a lot of it is connecting art and social change. And when we would have our events together, we would have dinner. And one of the main things people were talking about, well, what can I do? And what I'm hearing you say is like how you can get involved with advocacy. Well, first, know about the issue, learn about how you can advocate for the issue, tying it to legislation. And then I'm also wondering, and then maybe what are you doing in your day to day or your community to move the issue forward? So this issue of legislation, can you tell us some legislations that are maybe up or may have happened recently that people can say, okay, I know this is what I need to be thinking about as I look at this issue?
Well, one of the things we have been heartened by in the Biden administration is the focus on poverty in kids. We have seen the extraordinary American Rescue Plan bill
Okay.
that is putting more money in the pockets of families who are struggling and who are in poverty and whose kids are struggling with hunger. That has been an extraordinary and in some ways groundbreaking piece of legislation that people should know about. It not only increased SNAP benefits for a longer period of time, but it provided an additional 25 million to expand and modernize online SNAP, so it makes it easier
Mm.
to go online and safely purchase groceries for pickup and delivery. Um, the pandemic EBT that I mentioned is permanently authorized during the school year in which there is any public health emergency. And things like WIC benefits to purchase fresh fruits and vegetables will receive additional assistance. So that is happening, but because of the historic nature of this pandemic, and that was over $1 trillion, that is only short term.
Mm.
We're going to continue to need long-term solutions. And so we need to be thinking about what comes after the American Rescue Plan. And that's what our work is going to be focused on. And that's what we want to get folks galvanized on. I wouldn't say there's a concern, but I think many organizations are thinking about it. When we re-emerge
Right.
into society, more folks are getting the vaccine. You may not be seeing all the images on television and the news of people in the lines for food banks. When this moment is over, this pandemic and the effects of the pandemic will be far from over.
Right.
This has to remain front and center as an urgent crisis. There's so many issues because of this pandemic that kids are going to be facing. And as much as we're focused on the immediate short term, we have to think about long term and sustaining this work over the next several years.
Over the next several decades, I would definitely want to say. I want to stop and take a moment, Elliot, and connect the dots between your work and what people are doing at cultural institutions as well. One of the main pushes at cultural institutions is for there to be more appreciators of the arts and for there to be more patrons of the arts. And so, as a former school teacher, I want to say you cannot cultivate patrons of the arts when you have the majority of a population focused on basic needs. And
Mm-hmm.
so, if we say that we want to have more people attending cultural institutions, being able to participate, donate to the arts, we want to have people that are understanding the arts and using it as a part of their life. Then, in my opinion, you have to directly support organizations that are also helping people meet their basic needs because there is no, if you are caught up in that whirlwind of trying to get your basic needs met, or if you are a mother or a father and you're trying to feed a family, there's not enough mental energy and enough room to be able to bring all of the other beauty that's in the world. So that's why it's so important for us to support each other in these efforts. We want more patrons in the art. There's so many artists and patrons in the art and kids that are in families that don't have access to these resources. And this is a solvable problem that I think directly will tie to us having more people participate in the culture and the cultural fields. And so I just want to take that, because I think sometimes when we have these conversations, I want people to know why it is important for an art institution to talk to organizations that are working at the base and helping cultivate families and improve families, because we all directly benefit from this. So I just want us to say that directly and make that clear cut line. And in our audience, because people are so active, how can people support the work that you're doing, Elliot?
Good question. And I would just say first that I so appreciated you saying that all of these issues are so intertwined. Um, Hunger does not exist in isolation. It exists because a statistic I just read yesterday in the Washington Post that said 59% of Americans will spend at least 1 year living below the official poverty line. 59% of Americans. And so when you have issues of affordable housing, when you have issues of unequal health access, and so many other things, you can't get to the beauty of experiencing the arts and being inspired like I have by the arts. And so one of the things we're very focused on, even more so at Share Our Strength, is figuring out how do we get at the intersection of hunger with so many other issues, because we just can't look at hunger in isolation. It is so impacted by so many things. And so I'm very much looking forward to continue to be sort of on this journey with you as we talk about this. Um, because partnership together is the only way we're going to find our way through this. We cannot work in our own individual organizations and think we're going to solve issues. They're very much interconnected. If we've seen anything from this pandemic, it is that we are all interconnected. What one body, what one group does affects everybody else. And so I appreciate that sentiment. From the standpoint of what others can do from this, on this issue is raise your voice. Like I said, there are millions of individuals in this country that, again, do not know the extent of hunger and what kids are facing on a day-to-day basis. If your kid is in a good school, if your social network is around individuals who have no idea and never experienced hunger in their life, our job is to keep the intensity and the urgency up. And so as much as you can raise your voice in your community, in your networks, on social media, whatever it is, your platform, that's critical. Join us in our advocacy efforts, and we'll be happy to follow up with you with more details on how you'll be able to do that. As new legislation comes up, as issues that we want to support, raising your voice to your local and federal representatives is hugely important and does make a difference. And then, of course, there's always financial support. I mentioned the extraordinary level of emergency grants that were necessary, and it has been enormous, but that is because the need is so extraordinary. We've launched something called the Monday Fund campaign, which is $100 million effort, a rebuilding and recovery campaign to make sure that kids are supported now and beyond this moment. We have been so fortunate that so far we've raised $66 million of that, but we still have a lot more work to do. And so as you're able and as you are able to inform your networks, that is another area that we hope folks will get engaged with us on.
So in what you were saying that, I wanted to go back to that statistic, 59%, did you say 59 or 69% will live below?
59% of Americans in their lifetimes will spend at least 1 year below the official poverty line.
I want to make that a direct tie also to women artists. A lot of times when we look at one of our partners, the Family Arts Museum, looks at how many artists are dropping out of the arts when they start to have a family, right? And usually the issue becomes housing and food. So hunger and food become a huge major issue about why a person may not continue on in the arts. And so we also know that women artists are a smaller portion of how they're getting paid in the equity, but we also know that women, as you said in the beginning, are some of the largest contributors to the health of their community, how their families are fed. And so we have to really create this care, as people who are champions of women, which is why it's so important to have organizations like you all speak, that are champions of women are also champions of women artists. When you are making an opportunity for someone to have more accessibility to food, you're also freeing up some of their energy. Some of our greatest minds are tied up and trying to figure out these things. And so I wanted to just that statistic is like a very important thing. 1 year below the poverty line can completely change your trajectory on how you show up in so many things in your future.
Absolutely. Hunger is a physical pain, but hunger has also a mental impact. What that does from the standpoint, we talked about stigma in children, what we talked about from the standpoint of self-esteem. I remember, my mother worked really hard to feed us, but there were occasions where we had to get support. But when you get that support, one of the things it says to a young person is that you're seen. One of the things it says is that I appreciate you. And so what it did for me is I was a reserved kid, but what it did for me is when we started getting support, I started raising my hand in class.
Right.
I started participating in extracurricular activities. And that's the same mindset for kids and as well as family members. When you're a parent and you're constantly worrying about how to feed your kids, you don't know, many don't know how debilitating that is on a day-to-day basis. And so many of these issues that are core to individuals fully embracing and fully experiencing the full of society have to be addressed so people are able to do that.
And I want to applaud your organization's innovation and how you all engage and serve your community. Going back to what you were saying about pushing for breakfast to be served after the first period, right? I mean, and this is something that I think cultural institutions can learn. Your audience has a pattern. You want to serve your audience, adjust to the pattern, and then it could be that simple. And one of the things that's also that I see you all doing that I would love to hear you talk about is this food justice series. Can you tell us more about what this is and how people can participate in it?
I appreciate that, Elena, definitely. So the Food Justice Series, which is a relatively new series for us, but one that we're hugely excited about. We've been blown away by the response so far, but we started it last October. And it was born out of that idea with some of what we talked about a little bit is that as an organization, we have a responsibility, especially in this moment, to not only support kids, but to influence the narrative around hunger, the narrative around its impact, the depth of the crisis, and to be honest about the multiple factors that keep people hungry. And so the key goals of the series are to educate, inspire, and challenge assumptions, and to share resources with tools that folks can take back into their communities and other organizations. Our partner in this effort is the Food and Society program at the Aspen Institute, and we are so thrilled to be collaborating with the Aspen Institute. As you know, they're one of the preeminent conveners in the world focused on values-based leadership and finding common ground, which is essential for us in this moment that is so divisive. We want to have conversations in a deliberate and constructive way that, again, will challenge you and to think differently, perhaps. And so we launched last October, the inaugural session. We talked about the evolution of the food justice movement. We had one of the first members of the Black Panther Party talking about the work of the Black Panther Party and their work about the free breakfast program and the parallels to the moment of today. We've addressed everything from health to hunger. Hunger is a racial equity issue, and we're looking forward to continuing this conversation. I would flag, because it's on the screen, our next conversation is actually Thursday, April 1st, where we're going to talk about an issue that should be talked about a lot more, food sovereignty and food justice for Native peoples. And so we have an extraordinary panel, an extraordinary lineup, and again, it's twofold. We want to educate people, but we also want folks to be moved by a discussion and hear from people that they might not on a normal basis be able to hear from. And I would just say the final piece of the Food Justice Series is that we want these conversations not to be static, but to be dynamic, living conversation. So after the conversation is over, we want them to continue. So one of the things we do immediately following is we produce a summary to action report.
Hmm.
It's not only a summary of the conversation, but any resources discussed, any things that folks can take back into their own organizations, we provide that, and hopefully that will allow the conversation to continue even after.
I love it. That's fantastic. And these are just one of the many ways that people can become more aware of the issue and participate. And like you said, continue the conversation through action. So if someone wants to work directly with you, and if they want to support, if they have a resource that they can provide or to advance your mission, how can they do that?
Well, anybody, any point can reach me directly at Share Strength, but also just check us out on the web, nokidhungry.org. You'll see our Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Um, we are always eager to invite and welcome new partners to work on any of a multitude of areas. Um, with folks that are coming from the same spirit of we have an extraordinary opportunity to change the life history of families. If there's one thing I want to leave everyone with, is that hunger is so much more than filling a belly. We are trying to make a generational impact in the lives of young people, and we want as many people as we can to be a part of that.
Elliot, I just have so much gratitude for the work that you're doing. As a former student, I mean, as a former teacher, I'm always a student, but as a former teacher, and really knowing the direct tie between hunger, a child's success, and the choices that they make in every area of their life, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate this campaign that you all have and what you're doing. And I really hope that our audience gets active and engaged. Through Curative Collective, we've presented so many ways that you can move from art into action, that you can move from inspiration into action, which is our goal. So if this is an issue that touches you, please reach out to No Kid Hungry, reach out to Cheryl Strength, reach out to Elliot, and see how you can become involved in it and connect the dots. Make sure that you see the direct correlation to ending hunger to expanding the arts. We want that. We want more people to be engaged, and they cannot be engaged if they are not able to go beyond their basic needs. We're looking forward, Elliot, to finding ways for us to expand you all's partnership with Reclamation. We'll be opening up our recipes again in the fall, and hopefully people will be able to participate. And I'm sure we'll have some more conversations on the way that your organization can participate. If you all have anyone that has some great recipes, especially, if you have something that's like really good and yummy on a budget, we want people to be able to contribute. We're opening up that back over at the end of the summer. So hopefully we can find other ways to work together, Elliot.
Absolutely. And I know we didn't talk about it, but look forward to sharing more about our Cooking Matters program, which is our nutrition education program, where we provide a lot of low-cost, healthy recipes. And so we're looking forward to supporting that way. We also are very connected in the culinary community. We have a lot of culinary friends that I'm sure would be open to providing recipes and resources. And so, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity and the possibility of collaborating, because in this moment in our time, this is what we need more than anything, organizations and groups coming together. And I would just conclude with, I was watching a program the other day, and they were talking about what were some of the lessons that we've all learned from the past year and from the pandemic. And one of the things that I heard that hit me the most is the individual said, divided we fall. When we're not connected, when we're not expressing empathy, when we're not opening our minds to collaborate and hear other perspectives, we're not going to end childhood hunger We're not going to advance the arts. We're not going to advance so many other issues. And so I conclude sort of in that spirit. At Share Strength, our core mission is about expanding the reach of our partnerships and making sure that everybody, no matter where you're from, has something to offer.
Elliot, I appreciate that, and I do, because I think it's important for us to talk about this really quickly, and then we can conclude again. Tell us about Cooking Matters. Like, I don't even know how that got off of my radar and off my checklist. I am thrilled about this. So tell us, what is it, and what are you all doing?
So, Cooking Matters is a program that is core at Share Strength, and it's about making sure low-income parents and their caregivers have the skills they need to serve nutritious foods to kids from pregnancy through the age of 5. And so, one of the things that we know is if you are educating parents and kids at a young age about nutrition, that it could bode well in many years to come. And so Cooking Matters is about providing educational resources. It is about ensuring that when you go to a grocery store, you can look at a label and see something that just because it says very nutritious on a label, actually you need to look at the ingredients and it's like filled with salt. And so it gives hands-on education about that, in addition to hands-on cooking demos where we have parents come together where we show them how to prepare healthy, nutritious meals on a budget, and they get their hands dirty, and it's a very interactive program that is giving tangible, real life examples of how you can be on a path to make sure your kids eat healthy and nutritiously for a lifetime. And so Cooking Matters is a program we're very excited about and look forward to sharing more with you and this project about what we're doing there.
Well, everyone, please stay tuned. There will be more from the National Museum of Women in the Arts working with Share Our Strength. We will find other ways to partner. But this conversation is always a great starting point, so that we can talk about the ways that we're aligned, connect the dots between what's happening in our communities and what's happening in our culture and in the arts. Elliot, it is a pleasure and a joy to be able to talk to you. And thank you so much for all of the information that you have presented here today. And I do hope that people, if we could, put up how people can find Share Your Strength again, and about the No Kid Hungry campaign. Look them up on social media. Make sure you check them out on Facebook, check them out on IG, and then also go to their website and see how you can stay abreast. You all have a newsletter?
We do have a newsletter,
Okay.
and I can follow with you, and you can share it out with the network.
Perfect. So go to the website, find out how you can put your email in, and so they can stay in contact with you and let you know what they're doing. Thank you, Elliot. Thank you so much for this experience. And any closing thoughts from you?
No, I'm just excited about continuing our conversation, and my closing thought is that throughout this pandemic, what we've been most inspired by is the resiliency of children. Kids who have been struggling in remote environments, who are still getting good grades and striving. Kids who have not had enough to eat, don't have internet access, don't have all the things that many kids in this country have, are still determined, are still striving. And so for us, we have to do everything in our power to support these kids. And so that is what motivates us. And so I leave that for everybody to think about, the incredible power and resiliency of our nation's children.
Thank you. And that concludes today's episode of our Curative Collective. Thank you, Elliot, for joining us, and everyone have a wonderful day and stay active, stay engaged.
Absolutely.